As a Marine, like I said, one of the things I loved about the Marine Corps was leading that group of, Lance Corporals, 18, 20-year olds that just left home on their own for the first time. I mean, I tell all my friends in the Marine Corps that the kids I'm coaching here are just the Lance Corporals that we coach in the Marine Corps. They just happen to be a little more athletic and got a scholarship to play football.
Episode 105 featured Coach Anthony Goliver, graduate assistant at UCLA. For more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Thanks for having me.
So, Coach Goliver and we actually connected, I think it was 2 years ago, right, Coach?
Yeah.
And so he is a graduate assistant that helps out with the LBs at UCLA. To officially get started, Coach, can you just share with the audience about your background and how you've gotten involved in your current role at UCLA?
Yeah, so grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Played high school football. Ended up going to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, where after a stint trying to walk onto the wrestling team there, I ended up playing sprint football. You're from the East Coast, so you're a little more familiar with it than the guys out here, but it's a lightweight football league, tackle football, just like what most of us are used to seeing on Fridays and Saturdays, but everyone on the field has a weight limit. So that got me back into football in my college days, but then stepped away from the game to be in the Marine Corps for about 7 years after commissioning from the Naval Academy. And then as I was getting out of the Marine Corps, was just looking for that next step and realized that coaching football was kind of the intersection of the two things I love, which is, leading that young group of at the time Marines, now players, and then my love for football. And so that intersection kind of led me to where I am today through an organization called Soldiers Sidelines. They're a volunteer organization that helps veterans find a renewed sense of purpose after they transition out of the military through coaching, whether it be at the community level, youth sports, all the way up to some soldier coaches have aspirations of coaching in the NFL and anywhere in between. So they help get me at UCLA as a volunteer, and then GA spot opened up during my volunteer time, and so that's how that came about.
Awesome. So, can you talk about your experience as a soldier and how that's helped shape your career so far as a coach?
Yeah, as a Marine, like I said, one of the things I loved about the Marine Corps was leading that group of, Lance Corporals, 18, 20-year olds that just left home on their own for the first time. I mean, I tell all my friends in the Marine Corps that the kids I'm coaching here are just the Lance Corporals that we coach in the Marine Corps. They just happen to be a little more athletic and got a scholarship to play football. But in terms of their life problems, they're all the same, girl trouble, trying to figure out what discipline is outside of their parents' home, who they want to be, separating their role from the identity, right? They're a player on the field, but who are they out off the field outside of this building? So those are all things that I dealt with daily with my Marines, whether it be the Lance Corporals or even the platoon sergeant who was my right hand man, and learning how to utilize him to get across to those kids as well. So a lot of the leadership is the same. Obviously, the skill sets are very different, but the leadership's the same, and the way you go about developing those skills are very similar.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, coming from a football background yourself. I'm sure you can attest to this, like playing. Football's, and I talk about this a lot. It's the perfect microcosm for life. Whether you're in the military, whether you're in business or a football coach. So, what are like a few values in addition to leadership that you've learned that have served you well?
I think the values I learned in the Marine Corps during my time, in terms of leadership values, is first you got to start with love. And I think more and more people are getting open to using that word amongst men, but I think that's where you got to start anything when you're leading is with love, because that means if you start from a place of love, your intentions are always going to be pure with the people you're leading, even if what you're trying to do, even if you're still trying to figure it out yourself, If you're starting from a place of love, then you've got that camaraderie and you've got that bond. Another value I guess that I use is I always try to explain the why and start with why. The book by Simon Sinek.
Mhm.
That was big in my leadership, that I still use today. Because if you explain the why to people, not necessarily just the how and the what, then you're going to get them to buy in more. And they're going to be able to accomplish what you're trying to get done, even if it may not look exactly how you envisioned it. And then the other values, love, starting with why, those are kind of intrinsic leadership things. But I think the values are just the character and the work ethic that you develop in the Marine Corps, and in the military service in general.
Definitely. And I think, like you were saying, like first starting off, it starts with coming from a place of love and caring about the players and your soldiers more than just like soldiers or athletes. You care about them as people. And like you were saying earlier, everybody has their own problems. Everybody's like we're all human beings. We're all the same. And I think that's really interesting you brought that up just because everything you do in life, it comes down to relationships. We just connected through Twitter a couple years ago and we saw each other at the conference. So we've kind of stayed connected through that, which is a perfect example. And I think what you've accomplished so far, like coming from the military and having that relationship with soldiers of sidelines is another great example too. Um, so in that same vein, coach, could you talk about soldiers of sidelines a little bit more?
Yeah, so like I said, Soldiers Sidelines is a nonprofit organization. Their mission centers around helping veterans find a renewed sense of purpose. It's founded and directed by a guy named Harrison Bernstein, who's a longtime coach at the college and NFL level. And he was working in DC at the time that he started it, and just realized he knew a lot of veterans, through his work in leadership and developing a leadership curriculum, and realized that a lot of the problems that veterans were having were from that lack of purpose, right? Your identity is so wrapped into being a soldier, being a Marine, being a sailor, being an airman. And then people get out and they kind of lose that sense of purpose. They might go to a 9 to 5 job, and they're going to work, but they get to see their family maybe a little bit more, but their actual job doesn't give them that same sense of purpose. And so, like you said, sports is a great vessel for leadership and life skills, right? So he kind of recognized that intersection, and said a lot of these service members have these innate coaching skills. I talked about the similarities between football and the Marine Corps. Like the skills are a little bit different, but the leadership, developing those skills, is all the same at its core. And he recognized that. And so he started this organization called Soldiers to Sidelines, and it's really grown tremendously. But they do an online certification, to get you kind of in the what they call the tribe. That's the network of, they call them soldier coaches. Us Marines, we have to adapt to that and be okay with being called soldier, but soldier coaches. Um, and once you're in that network, then it's kind of a choose your own path type deal, how invested you want to get into it. And again, that kind of goes into what your goal with it is. Do you want to coach in the youth sports level? Then he's going to help guide you to that. He's going to help find you programs. He's going to help get you the necessary certifications for that. And then for myself, I wanted to coach at the college level. So a lot of one-on-one mentorship, a lot of connecting me with the right people. And he's how I got to UCLA. Our chief of staff here at UCLA is a Marine veteran as well. So he's a supporter of Soldiers Sidelines. And so I got connected to him through that and was able to come on as a volunteer. But I can't speak enough good things about Soldiers Sidelines and everything Harrison Bernstein's done, not just for myself, but veterans all over the country and really the world now that they've gone virtual.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know about soldiers sidelines through Coach Aaron Brady, who was my high school coach at Malvern. And I know you mentioned you know him through the program.
Yeah.
And so going off of that, coach. So how long have you been at UCLA at this point?
I got here about 2 years ago. So right before or right after we met at the convention was my first day here at UCLA as a volunteer. So started out as a volunteer, like I said, about 2 months in, just working, uh, doing random tasks, that were asked of me and trying to create value where I could. And then the GA spot was opening up. So Coach Kelly and Bryce McDonald that offered me the GA position, and I was ecstatic to take it and run with it. So just finished our second season here and looking forward to 2024 in the Big Ten.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's going to be an awesome change.
Yeah.
Um, so I know you guys you had an 8-5 season. So can you talk a little bit more about your year this year? And then I know you had a bowl win too. So so can you talk about, where you guys are at, what you guys are feeling for, for this upcoming off season?
Yeah, we're feeling pretty good about this upcoming off season. Looking at records is sometimes hard. Being at UCLA, obviously, especially in our master's program with for the graduate assistants, John Wooden's kind of the central focus point of that, and so I've kind of adopted his philosophy of not paying attention as much about wins, but more about your own definition of success and maximizing your capability. Right, a lot of Coach Saban just retired, but the process oriented. Um, so 8-5, we were happy with it, not content with it. There were a couple games that we felt like we probably could have done a little bit better in, but yeah, it was a good year. Defense played really well. We were really happy with all the returning guys that came back this past year on defense. And so we played really well. A couple games that we wish we could have back, but can't do anything about those now. But I was really happy with, you mentioned the bowl win, how the guys kind of rallied around. Just before the bowl game, our defensive coordinator had moved to a different position. So the guys really rallied around our D line coach who got elevated for the bowl game and then is elevated to defense coordinator for next year. We're really excited about that, and the guys really rallied around him to finish off the season on a high note and send the seniors out the right way. So we were really excited about that. And then, like you said, going into next year, going into the Big Ten, it's going to be different. Obviously, different conference. Like I said, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, so Big Ten country is pretty familiar for me. But for a lot of these guys that grew up in Southern California, it'll be different for them. But we're excited about the challenge and excited about uh, the level of competition we're going into, and we feel pretty good about it.
Yes, sir. And I can't remember, are you guys at Penn State this year, or is it out there?
I honestly got to check the schedule. I've been focused on the self scout, haven't quite gotten to looking at the schedule. I know it's out there, and we'll get to it, but been doing mostly self scout, evaluating ourselves. So don't have the 2024 schedule committed to memory yet.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So great, coach. Well, thanks for sharing all that. Any last words that you want to share with the audience today?
No, I think that's it. I think I appreciate you having me on. We connected through the passion that I think both of us have for how do you find that how do you find the best way to evaluate your players both efficiently and effectively, right? So that you get a ton of reps in practice, but how do you communicate the level of improvement they need? How do you evaluate them? How do you, as a coach, take a subjective approach when it comes to uh, evaluating them, but also an objective approach of when it comes time to figure out who's ready to play and who's not. And so that's kind of the passion that I think both of us have connected through the last couple of years is finding that best way to do that. And so I think it's really cool what you have going on, and I appreciate you having me on the podcast.